I was 7 months pregnant when my FIL took my car keys and said, "You're not going to that job anymore. You're just a breeder now." My husband nodded. That night, I walked 3 miles in the cold to file the papers that would destroy everything they'd built. I'm Casey Morales. I'm 32 now, but back then I was 27 and pregnant with our first child. We lived in Ashtabula, Ohio, small town, gray skies, and a lake that made everything colder than it should be. I had a part-time job at a used bookstore on Bridge Street. It didn't pay much, but it kept me sane. My husband, Miles, worked full-time at a local HVAC company. We weren't rich, but we were okay. We lived in a rental owned by his parents, Frank and Violet, a couple miles outside of town. They called it helping us get started, but it always felt more like a leash. Frank was the type of man who walked into a room and expected silence. Retired early from selling cars, now he called himself a man of faith and ran Bible groups from his living room. He controlled everything, Violet, Miles, even little things like where we parked. Still, I thought we were surviving. Until that morning. I had a shift that day, nothing fancy, just helping stock books and ring up regulars. I'd already packed a small lunch, wrote down my doctor's appointment for next week, and was heading out the door. My belly was huge, my feet hurt, but the air outside smelled like cold rain and freedom. I was halfway to the car when Frank stepped out from the garage. He stood there, arms crossed, not saying a word. Then, right as I pulled out the keys, he stepped forward. "You're not going to that job anymore," he said flatly. I blinked. "What?" Frank held out his hand. "Give me the keys. You're not going anywhere. You're just a breeder now." It didn't feel real. My heart started racing. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said. "Miles and I talked. You've done your job. You're carrying our grandchild. You don't need to be out running around. That bookstore nonsense ends now." I turned to Miles, who had just stepped out behind him, coffee mug in hand. His eyes met mine for a second, and he did something I'll never forget. He nodded. He nodded like it was already decided. Like my life, my autonomy, was something he could silently sign away. I couldn't speak. My hand opened, and Frank took the keys. I didn't cry right then. I went back inside, numb. I stared at the fridge for an hour. I thought about how I was becoming the woman I swore I'd never be, dependent, voiceless, trapped. That night, they all sat down for dinner like nothing happened. I excused myself early, saying I didn't feel well. I locked the bathroom door, pulled out the manila folder I had hidden behind the cabinet. I'd filled out the paperwork months ago. Divorce, temporary custody, restraining order potential. I never filed them. I kept telling myself things would get better. That Miles would stop letting his dad make our decisions. But that day broke something. By 11 p.m., I was dressed in my thickest coat, scarf, boots. I stuck the folder under my arm, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped into the cold. The car was gone. Miles had driven it back to Frank's garage. No taxis at that hour, and I didn't dare call anyone, they'd all tell Frank. I walked. 3 miles in the freezing dark, pregnant, knees aching, legs burning. The sidewalk was slick with half-frozen rain, my breath came out in sharp gasps. My back was screaming by mile 2, but I didn't stop. When I got to the Jefferson County Courthouse, I stood shaking at the door for a minute, then knocked until a night security guard opened up. I told him I needed to file emergency paperwork. He looked at my face, then my belly, and just nodded. Led me to the clerk window. I filed every document. Divorce. Emergency car order. Spousal support petition. Request for exclusive residence in the rental. I walked home slower. My legs barely moved. I think it was almost 3 a.m. when I got back. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and waited for the sun. The fallout started fast. Miles came in confused, holding the papers like they were covered in poison. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. "You let your dad take my keys," I said calmly. "You stood there and let him treat me like livestock. You didn't speak. You agreed. I didn't mean, he started, but I cut him off. You meant it. You agreed. So now I'm agreeing with you. We're done. I moved out the next day. Took what I could, slept at a friend's place until the court granted me temporary use of the rental. The cop served Frank the order, he flipped. Came pounding on the door 3 days later until a neighbor called it in. After that, I got the restraining order. He violated it twice. I started seeing a therapist, enrolled in a virtual teaching program. Miles tried calling a few times, but it always circled back to "you're being dramatic" or "he didn't mean it." So I stopped picking up. At 7.5 months pregnant, I was living on my own, dealing with Braxton Hicks contractions and legal battles. Frank and Violet started spreading lies around town. Called me unstable. Said I ran off with another man. Then they made a mistake. They tried to sue for the car. But Miles had signed the original registration over to me a year before. And I had a copy. Their lawyer was stunned. I submitted a sworn statement detailing Frank's threats, his harassment, and the incident with the keys. I submitted text messages from Miles apologizing for letting Dad take over. The court leaned in my favor. That's when I realized I could hit back harder. The car case backfired on them. Frank and Violet ended up having to pay my legal fees. Not much, but enough to sting. That's when the real campaign started. They used their church as a weapon. Frank stood at his pulpit, preaching about loose women who abandon their duty, destruction of the family, temptations of modern independence. It wasn't subtle. People knew who he was talking about. A few of his regulars left. But plenty stayed. The small-town crowd, people who'd bought cars from Frank 20 years ago, people who thought women like me were the problem. Miles kept showing up at the rental. Once with groceries. Once just to sit in the driveway. He never knocked. Just watched the windows. I ignored him. I focused on getting through the last month of pregnancy. I painted the baby's room light green. I worked through online courses when I couldn't sleep. I went to therapy. I built a wall around myself brick by brick. Then one day I got an email from an old coworker at the bookstore. I saw your husband today. He said you were having a nervous breakdown and that your baby might not be his. Thought you should know. I sat still for 10 minutes. Then I printed it out. Miles had told lies at the church, too. Said I was unstable. That I'd cheated. That maybe I was having a breakdown and regretting getting pregnant. He was trying to frame me as unfit. I called my lawyer immediately. We filed an emergency injunction to prevent any custody action until after a psychological review. I passed, no problem. I requested that any custody be supervised until further review. That's when Miles turned up the heat. He started leaving letters in the mailbox. I'd open them and find page after page of apologies, then one small paragraph tucked in the middle blaming me for everything. He said he was sorry his dad went too far, but if I'd just been more respectful, maybe Frank wouldn't have stepped in. He said he missed the woman he married, not the ice queen I'd become. One letter ended with, "We can still fix this, if you come home before the baby arrives." It was signed with a Bible verse. I didn't respond. I took the letters to my lawyer. But then something strange happened. I got a call from Allie, one of the girls who used to volunteer at Frank's church food bank. She sounded nervous. "Casey," she said, "I don't want to stir the pot, but I think you should know, Frank's been applying for community grants using your name." What? I saw the paperwork. He said the church was assisting a struggling pregnant woman named Casey Morales, listed you as a community recipient to qualify for a state donation match. He was stealing state money. Using me as a cover. I asked for proof. Allie sent a picture, his signature on a form, my name typed under beneficiary. That was the twist. I took it straight to my lawyer. He blinked at the documents. "You realize," he said slowly, "this isn't just harassment. This is fraud. If he's cashed checks, he has. This is going to burn the whole place down." That's when I knew. They thought they could shame me. Trap me. lie about me. But they forgot one thing. I was done playing defense. The fraud report went through the following Monday. My lawyer filed with the Ohio Attorney General's charitable law section. He included screenshots, the photo of the grant paperwork, the email from Allie, and a notarized affidavit from me stating I never received any church assistance, never consented to be listed, and had not spoken to Frank in months. By Friday, an investigator had already called me. Frank had taken over $9,000 in state-matched community funds using a list of names, mostly real people from the church, plus mine. He'd spent the money on repairs to his home ministry building, which was really just his converted garage. A few grand went to a side business registered in Violet's name. The investigation got serious fast. They subpoenaed church bank records. His congregation started asking questions when the office was closed 2 Sundays in a row. Violet stopped answering her phone. Frank disappeared from the pulpit and started sending out Facebook rants accusing state demons of targeting God-fearing men. Meanwhile, I was 39 weeks pregnant. I could barely sleep. The rental pipes clanked, the baby kicked all night, and I was alone, but steady. Then came the knock on my door. It was Miles. I didn't want to open it, but something told me to look him in the face. He looked thinner, pale. Eyes sunken. I didn't know, he said quietly. About the grants. About what my dad was doing. I didn't answer. I've been staying with a friend. My mom won't talk to me. She thinks this is all my fault. I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed over my belly. She's not wrong. He looked down. I didn't know how far he'd go. I thought he just wanted what was best. You stood there, I said. When he took my keys. You nodded. I know, he whispered. That was the worst mistake of my life. Then he looked up. But I think you should know. He's planning something. He said if they come after him for fraud, he's going to bury you. He's been talking about custody. Said you're unstable, that he has recordings. My heart stopped. What recordings? From the security cams. At the old house. Audio from when you were pregnant. He says you yelled at him. He's editing it. Cutting pieces. Trying to make it look like you were violent. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice even. Let him try. I closed the door on Miles. Locked it. Called my lawyer again. We filed a notice that any recordings from that residence were obtained without consent. We preemptively submitted transcripts of every police call, text, and incident. But I wasn't done. I went public. I contacted a reporter from the Star Beacon, someone who'd covered local fraud cases before. I gave her everything, copies of Frank's fraudulent grants, the custody threats, the manipulated audio, the history of harassment. I told her I wasn't afraid anymore. 2 weeks later, an article ran on the front page, local church leader accused of state grant fraud and harassment, pregnant woman says she was targeted and silenced. Frank's world began to collapse. The county froze church assets. His congregation scattered. The church was stripped of nonprofit status pending investigation. His home was searched. Miles called once more after the article ran. I didn't answer. And then, I went into labor. It was early morning. Cold, gray skies again. My friend drove me to the hospital. I gave birth to Lila Grace, 6 pounds, strong lungs, full head of hair. In that moment, holding her tiny body against my chest, I felt something shift. Not just relief. Not just love. Power. I'd done it. I'd survived everything they tried to take from me. And now I had a new reason to keep pushing. Lila was 6 weeks old when Frank was indicted. 3 felony charges. Fraudulent use of public funds, wire fraud, and falsifying documents tied to the community grant. Violet wasn't charged, but investigators noted she was willfully complicit. She'd signed a few of the checks. Her bank accounts were frozen. Their home, which doubled as the church, was seized under asset forfeiture laws. Frank didn't go quietly. He screamed during arraignment. Said the system was being weaponized by bitter women who didn't know their place. His lawyer tried to claim diminished capacity due to stress and age, but the prosecution dropped a bomb. They had hours of recorded sermons, dozens of signed statements from former members describing abuse of funds, and the kicker, emails where Frank bragged about tricking the state system. The judge denied bail. Miles called again. I answered this time. He was quiet. He's done, he said. Yeah, I replied. So are we. I know, he said. But there's something else. He explained that during the investigation, the IRS had launched a parallel inquiry. Turns out Frank hadn't properly reported income from side business deals for the last 3 years. He'd claimed Violet as a religious employee. She wasn't. They owed nearly $80,000. They lost everything. Their retirement. Their cars. Their reputation. Miles was living in a rental above a bait shop on West 58th. He'd lost his job, not officially fired, but quietly let go after too much press. The HVAC company didn't want their name associated with him. He was working part-time at a mechanic shop now. He asked to see Lila. I said yes, under supervision. We met at a public library cafe. He brought a stuffed elephant and sat awkwardly while I fed her a bottle. She looked nothing like him. All me. He asked if there was any chance of us fixing things. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, no. I'm raising her to know what safety looks like. That starts with knowing when to walk away. He nodded, wiped his eyes, and left. The final hearing came 3 months later. I was awarded full legal and physical custody. Miles was granted supervised visitation, twice a month. Frank's sentencing was scheduled the same day. He got 8 years. No parole until year 6. Violet moved in with a cousin in Toledo. She sent me a handwritten letter once, saying she was sorry for how things got out of hand. I didn't reply. The day after the hearing, I packed up the last of our things and left Ashtabula. We moved to Cleveland. I got a job teaching literacy at an adult education center. Rented a 2-bedroom with a balcony. I planted little herb pots. Lila took her first steps on the hardwood floor, laughing as she wobbled toward a patch of sunlight. I thought about Frank every now and then. Sitting in a cold prison cafeteria, the world no longer bowing to him. I wondered if he still thought of me as just a breeder. I hoped he did. I wanted that phrase to haunt him. To echo in every moment he sat powerless, watched by guards, forgotten by those he once controlled. And me? I found peace. Not overnight. Not cleanly. But steadily. I forgave myself for staying too long. I forgave myself for needing proof before walking away. And then I started helping other women in similar situations, single moms, survivors, women who felt silenced. I told them this: your voice is the match. Their lies are the fuel. Don't be afraid to burn it all down.